Hi, I'm Doc Halpern. A few weeks ago, I stopped at a roadside accident, nothing major. Then a young cop sneered at me and said, "What are you gonna do? Old man? Call your grandson?" He told me I belonged in a nursing home. But what he didn't know is that I once stitched a carotid artery shut with a bootlace, under fire. Wanna guess what happened when the bleeding man on the ground looked up and recognized me? Let me show you. "What the hell do you think you're doing, old man?" That's what the young cop barked as I knelt down beside the dented sedan. My hands already checking the woman's pulse. Blood trickled from her nose. Her eyes cloudy with shock. But still aware. I didn't answer him at first. "I asked you a question." He snapped louder, marching over. "You can't just walk into an active scene." I didn't walk. I muttered, eyes still on the woman. I parked safely, got out, and someone here's bleeding. "Sir," he said, dragging out the word like I was a child. "Step away. You belong in a nursing home, not in the middle of an accident scene." That's when I looked up. I saw his badge, shiny and too new, his face, too smooth, his tone, too cocky. "My name is Halpern, Lieutenant Harold Halpern, U.S. Army, retired. I was a field medic in Fallujah. You want to tell me again I don't belong here?" He scoffed. Before he could get another word out, the woman in the car blinked and whispered, Doc Halpern? You saved us. 2nd Battalion, Fallujah, you pulled us out?" The cop froze. That's when I stood up. "I once stitched a carotid artery shut with a bootlace," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "You think I can't handle a bloody nose?" The woman started sobbing softly. Not from pain, but from recognition, from memory. The cop didn't speak for a beat. He just stepped back, visibly unsure now. His hands hovered near his belt, not threatening, just nervous. "You good here?" I asked the woman, gently bracing her head. "You dizzy?" She nodded, tears still streaming. "You saved my CO. You dragged him through hell." The cop looked between us. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't. I cut him off, because you didn't ask, you judged." A second patrol car pulled up. More uniforms spilled out. One older officer, with silver at his temples, recognized me instantly. "Doc," he said, walking quickly. "Harold Halpern?" I nodded once. He turned to the rookie. "Officer Daniels, go wait in the car." "But..." "In the car." Daniels retreated, red-faced. The older cop turned back to me. "Doc Halpern, damn, you saved my uncle in Mosul. Never forgot your name." The woman in the car smiled weakly. "He's still the same, calm as ever. Saved my life then, saving it now." I felt my legs ache from crouching. My knees don't hold like they used to. I stood slowly, with effort. They offered to drive me home. I said no. I walked back to my truck in silence. The wind was biting cold. I didn't say much that night at dinner when my daughter called. "You okay, Dad?" "Had a thing," I said. "Long day." She paused. "You miss it, don't you?" I didn't answer. But I sat with the bootlace on my nightstand. The one I kept after Fallujah. Blood-soaked once. Still knotted. Still mine. Ellipsis. The video went viral overnight. I didn't even know I was in it until Lucy called. Half panicked, half proud. "Dad, you're trending." That sentence means nothing to someone who spent most of their life dodging bullets and shrapnel. But I heard the tightness in her voice. She texted me the link. There I was, blurry at first. Then sharp. My hands steady. My voice calm. The rookie cop's tone, dismissive and sharp. And then that line, mine, cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "I once stitched a carotid artery shut with a bootlace. You think I can't handle a bloody nose?" Boom. Instant hero of the hour. Instant outrage. And instant chaos. I just finished pouring coffee when someone knocked on my door, not the usual tap-tap of neighbors or mail carriers. This was 4 sharp raps. Military rhythm. I opened it to find 2 men in dark jackets. One holding a press badge. "Mr. Halpern, mind if we ask you a few questions?" Local News 8. I didn't say a word. Just closed the door, slow and firm. Behind me, the landline rang. I picked it up. "Mr. Halpern, this is Officer Ramirez from Precinct HQ. You're not in any trouble. But..." I cut him off. "Did Daniel send you?" No, sir. Honestly, he's under review. Good. Later that afternoon, I stepped out for groceries. The cashier stared a little too long. The guy behind me in line patted my shoulder. You're the doc, right? From the video? I gave a nod, said nothing. Truth is, I didn't want the attention. I never wore my medals. Never told my neighbors what I did in Iraq. Because none of it felt heroic. It felt necessary. On the way home, I passed the town's community center. Out front, the American flag was drooping, twisted around the pole, caught in its own ropes. Sloppy, disrespectful. I parked, walked up, and untangled it. My fingers knew the weight, the texture. Folding a flag correctly, it's something you never forget. Then came the voice again. Different this time. A woman, late 20s, maybe, blazer, sunglasses. Sir, are you authorized to handle that flag? I turned. She looked fresh out of college and full of protocol. Ma'am, I said, I bled next to it. I buried men wrapped in it. I've earned the right to keep it upright. She stared, unsure whether to argue. Behind her, a janitor peeked out the door, eyes wide. That's Doc Halpern, he whispered. Saved my brother in '03. And just like that, her tone changed. I drove home in silence. At every stoplight, my hands tightened on the wheel. Not from anger, from ache. Because this country used to look a man like me in the eye. Now it glances, it posts, it scrolls. I'm not bitter, but I am tired. That night, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Letters, commendations, photos with names I no longer spoke out loud. And at the bottom, a single envelope. Unopened, yellowing. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It read, "To the man who never flinched." I hadn't flinched yet. But I was starting to feel the tremor. Ellipsis. The letter sat on my kitchen table all night. I didn't open it, just stared at it like it might explode. Maybe in a way, it did. By morning, the street outside was lined with camera vans. I counted 4, one from the city, one from out of state. One didn't even have logos, just black tinted windows and a satellite dish. They wanted a story. I wasn't gonna give them one. I put on my old jacket, the brown one with the faded VA patch, and slipped out the back fence like I was back on recon. I headed straight to Joe's Diner. The one place left in town where the coffee's strong and nobody cares if your knees creak when you sit. The bell above the door jingled. "Doc," Joe said from behind the counter. "You're early." I grunted. World got too loud. He poured my usual without asking. Black, no sugar, burn your tongue hot. A few stools down, someone cleared their throat. I turned, and damn near dropped my cup. It was Officer Daniels. "Mind if I sit?" I looked him up and down. No uniform, hoodie, hands stuffed in the front pocket. Kid looked like he hadn't slept. "Go ahead," I said, "long as you don't try to frisk me for a coffee spoon." He sat, didn't smile. I screwed up," he said quietly. I said nothing. I was raised to think people earned respect through rank, through protocol. I didn't know who you were. That doesn't excuse it. "You're right, it doesn't," I said, blunt as a hammer. "But at least you're here. That's more than I expected." He looked down. "I'm under review. Might get pulled off active duty." I sipped my coffee. "Good. Maybe a little time off will teach you how to listen." Silence. Then he asked, "What was it like, over there?" I looked out the window. Across the street, a flag hung limp over the post office, still not fixed right. I stared at it too long. "Loud," I said finally. "Hot. Confusing. People screaming in languages you can't understand. And blood. Not like in movies. It's darker, thicker, smells like metal." He didn't speak. I leaned forward. "You know what the worst part was?" He shook his head. "Coming back here, and realizing people care more about optics than duty. About titles than action." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir." "Don't call me, sir. I worked for a living." He smiled, finally. Before he left, he reached into his hoodie and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "What's this?" "A statement, saying I acted out of line. Signed it myself. Gave it to Internal Affairs. But, figured you deserved a copy." I didn't take it at first. "Why?" He looked me dead in the eye. Because accountability matters. And you reminded me what that looks like. I took the paper. Didn't say thank you. Didn't have to. By noon, the press had camped on my lawn. Lucy called again. Dad, you're on CNN. I sighed. I don't want 15 minutes of fame. Kid, I just want 15 minutes without someone asking me what Fallujah was like. Then she said something that stopped me cold. Too late. They're inviting you to speak at the town hall next week. About veterans. About service. The mayor called. Said the town needs someone real. Someone real. Not a soundbite. Not a puppet. I looked down at my hands. Scarred. Steady. I hadn't been on a stage since I gave a eulogy in Baghdad. And now, they wanted me under a spotlight. Hell. I guess the war wasn't over after all. Ellipsis. I hadn't worn a suit since my wife's funeral. Even then, it didn't fit right. But the town hall was full. Too full. People standing along the walls. Fold-out chairs added last minute. Phones already recording before I even stepped on stage. I told the mayor I didn't want a script. No teleprompter. No PR representative whispering bullet points into my ear. He said fine. Be yourself. Doc. That's what they want. So I walked up there in the same scuffed shoes I wore to every funeral back in Iraq. Cleared my throat. No microphone needed. The room was dead silent. I didn't come here to be thanked. I came here because silence is a disease. And too many of us have caught it. People blinked. I didn't get drafted. I signed up. I knew the risks. I wore the uniform with pride. I stitched bodies back together with whatever I had, duct tape. Belts. Bootlaces, sometimes hope. A murmur rolled across the room. But what I didn't expect, I said, voice lowering, was to come home and have to fight for basic respect. Not medals, not statues, just decency. I looked at the front row. Officer Daniels sat stiff. Still not in uniform. Good. He needed to hear this like the rest of them. I've been called a relic. A burden. Yesterday, I was told I should be in a nursing home instead of helping at an accident. A wave of discomfort moved through the room. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked down. That's fine. Say what you want. But let me ask you this, when your kid's bleeding on the street, who do you want reaching into that car? I waited. You want a guy with an app? A guy quoting policy? Or someone who's tied a dying man's throat shut while mortars rained down? Silence. I kept going. We pretend veterans fade after war. That we go home and turn into statues. But we don't. We work. We raise kids. We fix broken shit, sometimes bodies. Sometimes towns. I paused. Sometimes ourselves. A woman in the back wiped her eye. I pulled out the yellowed envelope I kept unopened. Held it up. This was written to me after the war. I never opened it. I was scared of what it might say. Scared it'd remind me I was needed once, and forgotten now. I cracked it open. Read 2 lines. You kept my boy alive. You'll never be invisible to me. I folded it slowly. Looked out at them all. I'm not invisible. Neither are any of us. Not the ones in chairs. Not the ones with scars. Not the ones who had to come home and pretend we weren't different. Then I locked eyes with the mayor. So if this town wants to honor us, start by listening. Stop talking over us. And stop acting surprised when we step in. That's what we were trained to do. I walked off the stage before applause started. I didn't need it. But they stood anyway. All of them. Officer Daniels too. Lucy was crying when I got back home. Dad, she said, you blew up online. The speech is everywhere. Let them watch. I said, they already forgot what real looks like. Maybe this'll remind them. Then I sat down, poured a glass of bourbon, and turned off the lights. Because tomorrow? Tomorrow always comes. Ellipsis. By morning, I was back to being a trending hashtag. Hashtag Doc Halpern. Hashtag not invisible. Hashtag bootlace medic. None of that mattered. What mattered was the note stuck to my front door. White paper. Cheap inkjet printout. Stay in your lane, old man. I stood on the porch for a full minute, holding that note. No name, no return address, just those 6 words. I wasn't surprised. This country doesn't like veterans who speak plainly. It likes the tidy ones, the folded flag and the shadowbox ones. It loves the idea of us, not the truth. I walked inside and threw the note in the trash. Didn't tell Lucy. Didn't call the cops. What were they gonna do? Fingerprint a coward? But something shifted that day. Calls poured in, not just from reporters, but from veterans, real ones, guys I hadn't heard from in decades. "Doc, is that really you? Heard you laid it out up there. Still got that damn bootlace?" We swapped stories, some bitter, some hilarious. Most of them ended in silence. The kind that carries ghosts. I told them all the same thing. Yeah, I spoke, but I'm not done. And I wasn't. That afternoon, I drove across town to the VFW hall. Hadn't stepped foot inside since 2012. The paint was peeling, the windows fogged with age. A single flag outside, crisp, but lonely. I walked in. A few old-timers looked up. One of them squinted. "Halpern? Yeah. I thought you moved. Just moved on." They laughed, low and dry like rusted hinges. I told them I wanted to hold a town forum. Not a speech. A meeting. For veterans only. Bring your stories. Bring your anger. Bring whatever you've been holding in. That's all I said. Then I left. The next Thursday night, the room was packed. Wheelchairs. Walkers. Beards white as the walls. Some wore medals. Some wore flannel. Every one of them looked tired. I opened the floor. They spoke. One man talked about being called a murderer outside his grandson's school. Another said the VA had lost his file, again. A woman broke down describing how her husband, a fellow Marine, hadn't spoken a full sentence in 3 years. No one interrupted. No one filmed. We just listened. That night, something cracked open. Not just in me, in all of us. We weren't ghosts. We were a damn chorus, and we'd been silenced too long. As the meeting ended, a kid in his 20s came up to me, barely out of the service. "Sir," he said, "how do you keep going?" I looked him dead in the eye. "You stop expecting the world to hand you closure. You build it yourself, brick by goddamn brick." He nodded, tears rising. "I'm trying." I patted his shoulder. "Then you're doing better than most." Driving home, I passed that same flag outside the community center. This time it was flying right. Full, proud. Just like us. Ellipsis. The town changed, slowly, but visibly. After the veteran forum, folks started seeing us again. Not just nodding at the grocery store or giving the polite, "Thank you for your service," at gas stations. They really saw us, some for the first time. But not everyone was happy. The letter came in a manila envelope. No return address, just my name, handwritten, no stamp, meaning someone dropped it off by hand. Inside, a photocopy of my old military discharge papers. And across the top in red marker, "Hero, you were a glorified Band-Aid." I sat with that for a while. People think words bounce off us. That after combat, nothing cuts deep. They're wrong. I kept the paper, taped it above my workbench in the garage. A reminder, not of the hate, but of the reason I spoke in the first place. That night, I got a call from Lucy. She sounded worried. "Dad, there's a blog, it's trash. But it's gaining traction. They're calling you a fake." I almost laughed. "A fake?" "Yeah, saying there's no record of you in the unit. That the bootlace story is just a viral lie." My fingers gripped the phone tighter. "I buried 3 men with my own hands." I said, "I don't need a blog to validate that." She didn't respond for a moment. Then, "I believe you. But the internet doesn't care about truth. Just clicks." I knew she was right. Still, I wasn't going to sit back and let some faceless troll rewrite my history. So I went to the attic. Dust, boxes, a faded duffel bag I hadn't unzipped in years. Inside, the proof. Photos, dog tags, a field journal covered in blood and sand. And that damn bootlace, still knotted, still stiff. I called the local news station. Told them I'd do one interview, and I'd bring receipts. The next night, I sat under studio lights, blinking through the glare. The anchor asked, "Doc Halpern, why speak now?" I looked straight at the camera. Because I'm tired of the silence. Tired of watching our stories get twisted by people who never carried anything heavier than a laptop. I held up the bootlace. This held a man's life together for 47 minutes until evac arrived. You want to fact-check that? I can give you his name. The anchor blinked. Why do you think people are so quick to doubt veterans? Because we scare them, I said, not with violence, with memory. We remind them that freedom isn't clean. It's messy. It costs. And they'd rather believe in parades than in pain. The clip aired that night. The backlash was immediate, but so was the flood of support. Emails, letters, some from people I didn't know, others from men I thought were long gone. Then, 3 days later, a knock at the door. It was Daniel's. Again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a teenage boy, nervous, holding something in his hands. Daniels nodded at him. Go ahead. The boy stepped forward, arms shaking. It's for you, he said, from my dad. I unfolded the paper. Just one sentence. You saved my father in '04. I owe you everything. No name, no return address, just the sentence. I stood there, speechless. Daniels finally spoke. Doc, there's a whole generation that needs to hear you. Hell, I need to hear you. He looked serious, no smugness, just respect. You ever thought about writing it all down? I glanced at my old duffel in the corner. Maybe it's time, I said. Because some wars don't end with gunfire. They end when the truth gets heard. Ellipsis. We didn't have time to argue. Not out there in the raw chaos. The girl was seizing, her head jerking like a fish out of water. Limbs twitching uncontrollably. Blood matted her hairline. The young officer froze, eyes wide like he'd just seen a ghost. His hand hovered over his radio. I didn't wait. Move, I snapped. My voice didn't rise, but it cut like wire through a pipe. He didn't move, so I shoved past him. I dropped to my knees beside her, scanning her injuries, shallow breathing, weak radial pulse, dilation in her left eye. Head trauma. I'd seen this before, in dirt streets in Kandahar. In shattered Humvees under fire. She needed airway support now. Get me a first aid kit. I barked. The cop just blinked at me. Gloves, saline, trauma shears. Now. The kid snapped out of it. I heard him scrambling to the squad car. Keys jangling. Sir, we need EMS, he started. There's no time. If you delay one more second, she might not make it. My hands were already working. I cleared her airway. Used her own hoodie to create a jaw support. Her convulsions slowed. When the med kit finally arrived, I was 2 steps ahead. A makeshift head brace from a roadside sign. Compressed gauze to manage the scalp bleed. A tongue depressor from a fast food napkin dispenser. It wasn't battlefield medicine. It was something rawer, wilder, but her breathing stabilized. The driver, her mother, was sobbing now. Crouched beside us, fingers clutching the air. Will she? She's stable, I said, but we need an ambulance now. The cop already had dispatch on the line. His voice trembled. Status update? The dispatcher crackled. The cop swallowed hard. Female, mid-teens, stabilized at scene, assisted by, civilian. His voice faltered. Correction, assisted by, a retired Army medic. Doc Halpern. He saved her life. Silence on the line, then a faint. Copy that. When the paramedics arrived, I briefed them like I used to during dust-off. Vitals, injuries, response time. They nodded, impressed. As they loaded her up, the girl's mother grabbed my wrist. Thank you, she choked. Thank you, doctor. I'm not a doctor, I said, just someone who's seen too much not to help. The young officer stood aside. His face had changed. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it was something heavier, guilt. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I turned to walk back to my car. Wait, he called. I stopped. I'm sorry, he said, I didn't know who you were. I shook my head. You don't need to know someone's resume to treat them with respect. I got into my truck, fingers trembling slightly, not from nerves, from memory. My boots hit the gas. Behind me, the sirens were fading, but one sentence echoed louder than all of it. He saved her life. Ellipsis. The cold fluorescent lights in the station buzzed overhead like a swarm of invisible hornets. I sat stiff in the hard plastic chair, the back of my neck prickling with sweat. Across the room, Officer Trent stood by the vending machine, avoiding eye contact like a teenager caught in a lie. Detective Mason stepped in, his coat still damp from the rain, a manila folder tucked under one arm. He looked at me for a long second, more curious now than combative. "You were military, Doc?" he asked, walking over slowly. I nodded. "Army, field medic, Iraq, 04 to 08. He set the folder on the table and opened it, spreading out a few grainy photos from the roadside accident. Blood, a broken mirror, my hands over the driver's chest. He slid a separate sheet toward me, a glowing letter of commendation from a lieutenant colonel signed in 2005. "I did some digging," he said, "took a while to find. Not many Halperns who sewed arteries shut with bootlaces." I didn't answer. Mason pulled out a chair and sat, leaning forward. "Why didn't you say something when they cuffed you? Would it have mattered?" He paused. Maybe not to Trent, but to me, it would have. Silence stretched between us, taut like a surgical stitch. "I didn't need an apology," I said. "I needed them to see the person bleeding on the pavement wasn't a threat. I needed them to act fast." They didn't. Outside the window, dusk was folding in. Red and blue patrol lights washed over the blinds in rhythmic pulses. Mason drummed his fingers on the folder. "We got a witness. A guy in a truck saw the whole thing. Said you saved that man's life." I nodded once. He had a collapsed lung. I used the edge of a credit card to improvise a flutter valve. Basic field triage. Mason let out a breath. "You'll be released tonight. No charges." I stood slowly. "You should know, the kid I saved?" He called me Doc, recognized me from Fallujah. Mason raised an eyebrow. "That true?" I nodded. Small world, even smaller when people remember who they owe. He closed the folder. "You still practice?" I looked him in the eye. "Every time someone bleeds near me. I do." Trent lingered by the vending machine, still looking away. As Mason walked me to the door, he said quietly, "You've got friends, Doc. Some of us still remember what real service looks like." Outside, the wind had picked up, pushing against the awning. I zipped my jacket and stepped into the cold. Parked across the street was a beat-up Dodge Ram. Inside, the driver I saved gave me a nod through the windshield. A silent thank you. No cameras, no applause, just two men who knew. I headed home in the dark. A voicemail blinked on my phone when I got in. Unknown number. "Doc Halpern, this is Captain Torres. I was in that convoy you pulled out of the fire back in 05. I heard what happened. Some of us are getting together. We think it's time people remembered your name." Click. And just like that, something shifted. Not pride, not revenge, just the faintest sense that after all this time, someone still saw me. A knock echoed through my apartment. I opened the door and froze. Ellipsis. I stood under the sharp light of the hospital's hallway, the smell of antiseptic stinging my nose. I'd been here before, hundreds of times, but never like this. This time, I wasn't saving a stranger. I wasn't patching up a soldier. This time, it was Thomas. They had taken him in 30 minutes ago. Minor concussion, lacerations, but I knew that wasn't what hurt. It was the humiliation, the cruelty of being belittled for simply helping another human being. And that officer? I'd seen plenty of guys like him before, badge heavy, power hungry, loud until someone louder showed up. A nurse walked by, gave me a nod. I could tell she recognized me. Not from TV or any newspaper. Just the way she slowed her step. The way she held her eyes a second longer. It was the same look I used to get in the field when they realized I wasn't just another old man with a stethoscope. I was the last wall between them and death. The door opened, and Thomas stepped out, a bandage wrapped around his temple. He tried to smile, but it was hollow. "They let me out early," he said. "Guess I'm not as broken as they thought." I studied him, the man who'd once called me a relic, the man who told me to go home. "You all right?" He nodded, then looked away. "I didn't know who you were." "Sir, if I did, would you have treated me differently?" I asked. My voice didn't need to rise. The words cut clean. He looked at his feet. "Yeah, I guess I would have." "Then you haven't learned a damn thing." I turned, started walking, but halfway down the corridor, I stopped, because part of me still believed people could change. "But you can, Thomas, you still can." That kid on the ground today, he didn't need a badge. He didn't need a war hero. He needed a human being. Don't ever forget that. Back home, I found the old box. The one with my field gear, my notebook, my laces, my medals. I laid them out like an altar. One by one, I packed them into a shadow box. I drove it to the precinct. The front desk sergeant recognized me instantly. Word had gotten around. "You want to leave something, sir?" I nodded. "Give this to Officer Thomas when he's ready." Not before. I left without another word. Some lessons aren't spoken, they're felt. Weeks later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just 2 lines on the card inside. I saw the box. "I'll never forget what you did. I won't waste the chance." There was a bootlace inside, tied in a surgeon's knot. That knot meant more than any apology. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from stitches. It comes from respect, earned and given. Ellipsis. And that's what happened, when a laugh turned into silence. If this story moved you, even a little, don't scroll away. There are so many stories like this one, hidden in plain sight, stories of strength, sacrifice, and quiet dignity, stories that define veteran life. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. This is our veteran life, and every voice matters.